Dig up a coneflower that failed over the winter and turn it over in your hands. The stems snap off dry and brittle. The crown, that woody knuckle at soil level, feels soft under your thumb, brown, almost hollow. And underneath, where a settled prairie plant should have a fist of pale, ropey roots driving down into the dark, you find almost nothing. A few threads, a knot of tissue the size of a walnut, still holding the shape of the nursery pot. That plant did not die in January. It died the previous May, in a plastic container under a mist bench in a greenhouse 2 states away. And nobody noticed, because at the time it was covered in flowers. John Sam here with Seniors Gardening Advice, and this is the conversation nobody has with you at the checkout counter. Coneflower has a reputation as the toughest, most forgiving perennial in the American garden, and that reputation is fully deserved by about 1/3 of the plants sold under the name. The other 2/3 are a different story, and the difference has little to do with what you paid or how pretty the tag looked. By the end of this, you will know how to read a coneflower in the pot before you hand over money, which season of the year decides whether yours returns, and why the most respected trial garden in the country reached a conclusion that both the native plant crowd and the hybrid crowd quote only halfway. If you like gardening advice that comes with the reasoning attached instead of a list of rules, hit subscribe while we get into it. That tap keeps this channel making these for folks who have been gardening longer than the internet has existed. Let me lay the foundation once, so I am not repeating soil ratios at every turn. Echinacea is a prairie plant. Not a woodland plant, not a border plant, a prairie plant. It evolved on open ground with brutal sun, thin soil over subsoil that drains, hot dry Augusts, and winters where the ground froze hard and stayed frozen. Everything it does makes sense once you hold that in your head. So it wants 6 hours of direct sun minimum, and 8 is better. It wants soil that water moves through. Not sand, not gravel, just ordinary dirt that does not stay soggy for days after a storm. Here is a test worth doing before you plant. Dig a hole a foot deep, fill it with water, let it drain, then fill it again. If that second filling has not disappeared within 4 or 5 hours, that spot will eventually take your coneflowers, no matter what else you do right. It wants a first season of steady water while roots go looking, and then it wants the hose left alone. It wants no fertilizer, none. Rich feeding gives you tall, soft stems that fold in the first thunderstorm, and a plant spending its energy on leaves instead of the crown. And it wants planting at exactly the depth it grew in the pot. Not an inch deeper to be safe. That woody crown needs to sit at the surface where air moves across it. Bury it, and you have started a slow rot that surfaces 8 months later. Everything from here builds on those 4 things. Sun, drainage, restraint, planting depth. Truth number 1. And it changes how you think about hardiness. Cold does not kill coneflowers. Wet cold kills coneflowers. Purple coneflower is rated hardy to Zone 3, interior Minnesota, northern Maine, the Dakotas. Those plants sit under snow at 20 below and come up in April like nothing happened. So when a gardener in Ohio loses a whole row over the winter, cold was never the culprit. What kills them is a saturated crown during dormancy. From late October through mid-April, the plant has essentially shut down. It is not drinking or growing. If the soil around that crown stays waterlogged for days at a stretch, oxygen disappears from the root zone, and the organisms already in your soil, waiting for an opening, go to work. Phytophthora, Pythium, Fusarium, Sclerotinia. They are not exotic. They live in every garden in America. They simply cannot get a foothold in soil with air in it. This is why the same variety thrives for your neighbor and rots for you on the same street. It is why heavy clay beds and low corners where snowmelt puddles are graveyards for this plant. And it is why the most useful thing you can do for a coneflower is not feeding or spraying or covering. It is choosing a spot where February water leaves. If your ground is heavy, plant on a slight mound, 3 or 4 inches proud of the bed. That small rise, which looks almost silly at first, is often the whole difference between a plant that lasts 15 years and one that lasts 2. Truth number 2, which will save you money starting this weekend Wallaceurate. You can tell whether a coneflower will survive before you buy it, and it takes about 10 seconds. Tip the pot, slide the plant partway out and look. What you want is white or tan roots winding through the whole volume of soil, reaching the bottom, holding the shape together when you lift it. What you do not want is a plant in bloom sitting in loose potting mix with a few roots near the top and nothing below. That second plant is the one on every display table in May, and it is sold in exactly that condition on purpose. Growers push these to flower young because a blooming pot sells and a green pot does not. Many are also treated with growth regulators, chemicals that hold the plant short and compact and covered in buds while it is in the sales yard. The blooms come at the direct expense of the crown and the root system, which is the only part that has to get that plant through a winter. So here is what an experienced hand does. Buy the plant that looks slightly boring. Buy it early in the season, so it has the whole summer to build underground before the cold. And this next part hurts, but it works. On a newly planted coneflower, particularly a bright modern hybrid, pinch off the first flush of flower buds. All of them. You give up one show for a plant that puts an entire summer of energy into a crown thick enough to survive. Doing that with every hybrid I plant took my survival rate from roughly half to nearly all of them. Late season planting is the other quiet killer. A coneflower going into the ground in September in a cold region simply does not have time to anchor itself. Spring and early summer are your windows. If you find a beautiful thing on the clearance rack in autumn, overwinter it in the pot somewhere sheltered and plant it in April. Truth number 3, the one that explains most disappointment: the pot. The word coneflower covers about 9 different wild species, and they do not behave alike underground. Purple coneflower, Echinacea purpurea, is the familiar one. Broad leaves, rose-pink petals, orange-brown cone. Underground it makes a fibrous, branching root system. That is why it clumps up, why it divides with a spade, why it takes to ordinary beds so readily, and why it is the toughest of the bunch in average conditions. The prairie species are built differently. Pale purple coneflower, narrow leaf coneflower, yellow coneflower. These send down a taproot, a deep anchor reaching several feet into subsoil. That taproot lets them shrug off a drought that flattens everything around them. It is also why they hate being moved or divided and sulk for a year after transplanting while they rebuild. Here is where that matters at the garden center. Most vivid orange, red, and gold hybrids of the last 25 years came from crossing purple coneflower with those yellow and pale prairie species. The cross gives you the color. It also gives you mixed genetics, often with the chromosome count doubled to intensify the flowers, and frequently a slower, weaker start underground than either parent. That is the whole mystery of the short-lived coneflower. The color you are paying for is tied to the trait that makes the plant fussy about winter drainage. Not doomed. Fussy. Big difference, and the next point proves it. Truth number 4. The trial results both camps quote. Halfway Mount Cuba Center in Delaware ran the most thorough coneflower evaluation in the country from 2018 through 2020, growing 75 species and cultivars side by side in the same clay loam soil, scoring them on flowering, habit, disease resistance, survival, and visits from actual insects. Here is the part the native plant purists leave out. The straight wild species did not sweep the results. In an ordinary garden bed, several were floppier and shorter blooming than the best-named selections. And here is the part the hybrid marketers leave out. The great majority of the 75 did not distinguish themselves at all, and the flashiest novelties were heavily represented among the disappointments. 12 plants earned an outstanding rating. The standout was Pica Bella, a compact selection of purple coneflower with narrow rose-pink petals and a prominent orange cone, which had also ranked at the top of Mount Cuba's earlier evaluation more than a decade before. Repeating across 2 separate trials in 2 different plantings, years apart, is about as strong a signal as this hobby ever gives you. Sensation Pink, Santa Fe, Snow Cone, Fragrant Angel, Purple Emperor, Postman, Glowing Dream, and Kismet Raspberry also finished among the leaders. Look at what those names have in common. Not one is a pom-pom. Not one is a screaming neon novelty. They are single-flowered plants with sturdy stems, and several of them are grown from seed rather than cloned, which means each plant carries a little genetic variation, instead of every individual sharing an identical weakness. The honest takeaway sits between the 2 camps. Wild species are the right answer for lean soil, naturalistic plantings, and long-term colonies. Well-bred single-flowered cultivars are the right answer for a tidy border. And novelty color, chosen for the photograph, is where the money goes to die. If that framing helped, A like on this video pushes it toward other gardeners about to buy the wrong plant this weekend. Truth number 5. About the flowers that look like carnations is loof. The double coneflowers, the ones with a fat pom-pom sitting where the cone should be, are a problem for reasons beyond how they age. That pom-pom is sterile petals grown out of the disc florets. The disc is the working part of a coneflower. On a normal bloom, it is a cushion of hundreds of tiny individual flowers, each holding nectar and pollen. On a landing pad, any bee, wasp, or butterfly can walk across. Breathe the disc into petals, and you have built a beautiful thing with the door locked. Mount Cuba tracked this directly during their trial, counting insect visits on singles versus doubles. The gap was not subtle. Single-flowered plants pulled in traffic all day long. The doubles sat there looking lovely and largely ignored. I am not telling you never to grow one. If you adore them, grow a couple. But if you plant coneflower partly because you want monarchs and swallowtails and native bees in the yard, every double is a seat at the table, with the plate turned upside down. Plant singles for the insects and let the doubles be an indulgence, not the whole bed. Truth number 6. Where the usual deadheading advice goes wrong. Deadheading a coneflower is neither required nor forbidden. It is a timing question, and the timing is what nobody explains. Trim spent blooms through June and July, and the plant pushes a second, lighter round of flowers into September. That part of the standard advice is sound. The mistake is carrying the habit into late summer and fall, snipping every fading cone through October, because the bed looks neater. Those cones are the whole future. Goldfinches work them from August into deep winter, hanging sideways off the stems in the snow, and the seeds that scatter around the base are how one plant becomes a drift. Cut every cone, and you have a plant that is permanently a single clump, feeding nobody. So the working rule is simple. Deadhead early, quit by the first week of August, and let everything after that stand. Now here is the wrinkle almost nobody mentions. Those volunteer seedlings will not resemble the parent if the parent was a hybrid. Seed from a bright tangerine cultivar comes up as ordinary pink and purple, sometimes muddy, sometimes lovely, but never the plant on the tag. Trademark names are attached to a specific clone, not to a lineage. If you want your colony to look consistent as it spreads, seed down straight purple coneflower and let that be the plant that multiplies. Keep your fancy colors as individual specimens elsewhere in the bed. Truth number 7. The disorder you must not wait out. Once a season, walk your bed and look at the cones closely. If you find a flower with the center erupting into small green leafy tufts, petals that are stunted and greenish rather than colored, and foliage going pale and yellow at the same time, you are looking at aster yellows. This is not a fungus, and no spray touches it. It is caused by a phytoplasma, a bacteria-like organism carried plant to plant by leafhoppers, and there is no treatment, none. The infected plant is a permanent reservoir that leafhoppers will keep feeding on and moving along. Dig it out, roots and all, the same day you spot it. Bag it for the trash or burn it, never the compost heap. Then watch the nearest plants over the following weeks. One caution so you do not tear out something healthy. A normal coneflower will occasionally throw a flattened, ribboned, fused stem, which looks alarming and is a harmless quirk. A few cultivars carry green cones on purpose. Aster yellows has that signature of deformed greenish petals, leafy sprouts out of the cone itself, and yellowing foliage. When all three appear together, act immediately. Truth number 8, or how kindness does the damage more coneflowers, are killed by good intentions than by any pest in North America. The compost habit is first. We are all trained that dark, rich soil is the goal for every plant. For this prairie native, heavy annual amendment gives you lush growth on weak stems and a crown that holds moisture like a sponge. Mulch is second, and it is the one I see constantly. Shredded bark piled against the base over winter traps water precisely where the plant cannot tolerate it. If you mulch the bed, and you may have good reason to, pull it back and leave 4 inches of bare, breathing soil in a ring around each crown. In wet climates, a handful of pea gravel there works beautifully. Third is staking. When coneflower flops, a stake treats the symptom. Flopping means too little sun, too much nitrogen, or too much water, in that order. Fix the cause, and the stems stand on their own, stiff enough to hold a goldfinch. Fourth, overwatering a settled plant. After the first season, a coneflower in decent ground needs water only in a long drought. With this plant, Doing less is nearly always the better call. Truth number 9. The 4-year fade 8. Even a happy purple coneflower will thin out in place. Around year 4 or 5, blooms shrink, count drops, and a bald patch opens in the middle of the clump, while growth pushes outward in a ring. This is not disease, and it is not your fault. The center of a mature crown ages out while the young growth migrates to the edges, all of it competing for the same exhausted patch of dirt. The fix is division, and early spring is the moment, just as new leaves show at ground level. Lift the clump, shake it loose, and cut it into 3 or 4 pieces with a spade or serrated knife. Every piece needs roots and a couple of growth points. Discard the tired woody middle, replant the young outer sections 18 inches apart, water through that summer, and you are back to year 2 vigor with plants to spare. This applies to purple coneflower and its cultivars, the fibrous rooted ones. Do not attempt it on the taprooted prairie species. Slice a taproot and you usually lose the plant. Those you leave be, or start fresh from seed. Truth number 10. What fall cleanup costs you in Sibri? The tidy autumn bed, cut to the ground and raked bare in October, is an old habit worth breaking. Standing coneflower stems do 3 jobs through winter. They hold the seed cones up where finches can reach them above snow. They trap leaves and snow around the crown, which insulates without the sogginess of piled mulch. And the hollow stems become winter housing for small native bees, the little carpenter and mason bees that nest inside dry stalks. Leave the whole business standing until spring. Then, when the weather has warmed for good, cut the old stems back, but leave stubs about 12 to 18 inches tall rather than shearing to the ground. Anything nesting inside gets to emerge on its own schedule. The new growth hides the stubs within weeks, and by June, nobody can tell. Truth number 11. The pairing that quietly drowns the maize. The last one is a design error with a horticultural consequence. Coneflower gets planted beside hosta, astilbe, ferns, and hydrangea because the shapes and colors look wonderful together. Everything in that list wants steady moisture and afternoon shade, and coneflower wants the opposite of both. You water the bed for the thirsty half, and your coneflower crown spends 4 months damp. That is the exact condition we opened with. Pair for appetite, not appearance. Black-eyed Susan, little bluestem, prairie dropseed, salvia, catmint, yarrow, butterfly weed, sedum, Russian sage. Every one of those wants the same lean soil, the same full sun, the same neglect. Group them, and a single watering decision, which is usually to do nothing, keeps every plant in that bed content. And the combination looks like the meadow plantings that landscape firms charge a fortune to install, because that is precisely what it is. Do all of this, and something happens that no plant tag mentions. You get a colony, a properly sited purple coneflower in lean, draining soil, left uncut after August, ringed with bare ground where seed can reach dirt instead of landing on bark chips, will seed itself into a loose population of plants at every age. Not one specimen holding a spot. A self-renewing patch that replaces its own members faster than it loses them. That patch does not need you after a while. No dividing, no feeding, no watering, no replacing. It runs on rain and sunlight and the finches that scatter its seed a few feet at a time. Colonies started decades ago along fence lines by gardeners long gone are still flowering every July on properties that have changed hands twice, still feeding goldfinches every autumn, indifferent to whose name is on the deed. That is the real difference between the plant on the discount rack and the plant this can become. Same species, completely different outcome, and the whole thing turns on choices that cost nothing. So, quickly, what actually matters? Winter drainage decides survival, not cold. Check the roots in the pot and pinch the first blooms off a new plant. Know whether yours is fibrous rooted or tap-rooted before you touch it with a spade. Single flowers feed insects, doubles do not. Deadhead until August and then leave the cones alone. Aster yellows means immediate removal, no waiting. Skip the compost, pull mulch off the crown, and put the hose away. Divide purple coneflower every 4 or 5 years. Leave the stems standing all winter and cut high in spring. And plant it beside things that share its thirst. Get those right, and this becomes the least demanding plant you own, and quite possibly the one that outlasts everything else in the yard. If any of this was new to you, share it with the gardening friend who has replaced the same coneflower 3 years running. That is how this channel grows. New videos on what survives in real American gardens go up every few days. and I read the comments on every single one.